I never thought I'd be the woman who took away her son's dream house. But here I am, the mother-in-law who was banished to eat Thanksgiving dinner in the garage, the woman who made one visit to the county clerk's office that changed everything. Let me tell you how quickly a family can fall apart when the person your son married reveals their true colors, and how sometimes the only way to protect your child is to become the villain in someone else's story. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I'm Patricia Montgomery, 61 years old, silver hair worn in a classic bob that my granddaughter says makes me look like Meryl Streep. I've spent 35 years building the most successful interior design firm in Bristol County, raised 3 children after losing my husband James to cancer, and somehow managed to keep my sanity through it all. My youngest son, Michael, is the reason I'm telling this story. Michael, brilliant, kind-hearted, and unfortunately too trusting for his own good. The trouble began 4 years ago when Michael brought home Vanessa Pierce. She was everything a mother could want for her son, or so I thought. Impeccably dressed in a cream silk blouse and tailored pants, her dark hair falling in perfect waves, she looked like she'd stepped out of a luxury magazine. Her smile seemed genuine when she said, "Mrs. Montgomery, Michael talks about you constantly. I feel like I already know the amazing woman who created this beautiful home." I'll admit, I was charmed. What mother wouldn't be? Here was this accomplished young real estate agent who looked at my son like he hung the moon. She asked thoughtful questions about my design work, complimented the vintage chandeliers I'd collected over the years, and by dessert, even my daughter, Sarah, who's as skeptical of new people as a cat is of water, was won over. "She seems different," Sarah whispered when Michael and Vanessa stepped out onto the terrace. "He looks happy, Mom." And he did. After a string of relationships with women who never quite appreciated his gentle spirit, his dedication to teaching high school history instead of pursuing a more lucrative career, Vanessa appeared to be the exception. She remembered his favorite authors, surprised him with thoughtful gifts, and never made him feel less than for choosing education over finance. When they announced their engagement 6 months later, I was thrilled. At their engagement party, I raised my glass and said, "To finding someone who sees you completely and loves every part." Michael had tears in his eyes, and Vanessa pulled him close, kissing his cheek in a gesture that seemed loving, protective. I should have noticed how her fingers dug slightly into his shoulder, how his smile faltered for just a moment. But we see what we want to see, especially when it comes to our children's happiness. The wedding was everything they'd dreamed of. Simple but elegant, held at the historic Rosewood Hotel downtown with crystal chandeliers that caught the late afternoon light and turned it to magic. When I adjusted Michael's bow tie before walking him down the aisle, he'd insisted that without his father it could only be me. My heart felt so full I thought it might burst. "You deserve every happiness," I whispered as I placed his hand in Vanessa's. She smiled at me gratefully, and I really believed I was giving my son to a woman who would treasure him. The first year of their marriage seemed to confirm my hopes. They found a beautiful Victorian house in the historic district, a neglected gem with good bones and endless potential. The kind of house that could become a true family home with the right vision and care. When they struggled to secure financing, the housing market was brutal that year. I offered to help. Vanessa's face lit up, but she quickly composed herself. "That's so generous, Patricia, but we couldn't possibly." She squeezed Michael's hand. "We want to do this on our own, don't we, honey? Build something together." I respected that independence, that desire to forge their own path. What I didn't know then was that 2 months later, when they were still struggling with the down payment, Vanessa would approach me privately. "I've been thinking about what you offered," she said, voice lowered though Michael was just in the next room. "About helping with the house." She paused, perfectly manicured nails tapping against her coffee cup. Michael doesn't need to know, but I'm worried about his stress levels with all this uncertainty. Something in her tone made me uneasy, but my concern for Michael overrode my instincts. I agreed to help, not with a gift, but with a private loan. We drew up paperwork, and I became the silent holder of their mortgage rather than the bank. The arrangement seemed perfect. They got a better interest rate, I had a solid investment, and Michael could have his dream home without financial strain. "You're a lifesaver, Patricia," Vanessa said, shaking my hand after signing the papers. "This stays between us, though. Michael's pride would be hurt if he knew." I should have recognized the first red flag, secrets from my son, but I told myself it was just a wife protecting her husband's feelings, not wanting him to worry. I didn't realize I was helping lay the foundation for the control she would soon exert over every aspect of his life, or that this beautiful Victorian house would become both a prison and a weapon in ways I never could have imagined. The changes were subtle at first. Michael's weekly dinners with me became monthly, then sporadic. He stopped wearing the vintage Rolex that had been his father's, explaining that Vanessa thought it looked too flashy for a teacher. He cut back on his beloved weekend history, tours at the local museum, because Vanessa said they should focus on house renovations instead. When I asked him about these changes, he would smile that increasingly rare smile and say, "Marriage is about compromise, Mom. You taught me that." But I hadn't taught him to disappear. I hadn't taught him to become smaller, quieter, less himself. Then came the housewarming party incident, about 8 months after they moved in. I'd arrived early to help set up, bringing a vintage crystal chandelier I'd found at an estate sale, perfect for their dining room. Michael had mentioned wanting something special for that space, reminiscing about the chandeliers in my own home that had fascinated him as a child. The house was transforming beautifully, I had to admit. Vanessa had an eye for design, though her taste ran more modern than the home's Victorian bones suggested. The original woodwork had been painted stark white, the walls a cool gray. It was elegant, but somehow sterile, lacking the warmth I'd always associated with my son. "Mom!" Michael's face lit up when he saw me, but his eyes darted quickly to Vanessa, who was arranging flowers in the foyer. "The chandelier, it's beautiful, but we've already ordered lighting for the dining room," Vanessa cut in smoothly, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Modern pieces that better suit our aesthetic? Though it's so thoughtful of you to bring this, Patricia. Perhaps you could use it in your own home?" I felt the dismissal in her words, saw Michael's shoulders tense. "Of course," I said, keeping my voice light. "No problem at all." But as I wrapped the chandelier back in its protective covering, I noticed Michael touching one of the crystal drops wistfully. Throughout the evening, I watched their interaction with growing unease. The way Michael checked with Vanessa before speaking about their renovation plans, how he quickly changed the subject when his sister Sarah asked about his museum work, the nervous laugh that followed any statement that might possibly contradict his wife's version of events. The gray paint was Michael's choice, Vanessa told our guests, though I distinctly remembered my son saying he'd wanted to restore the original wallpaper. "He has such modern tastes now." "Actually," Michael started, then stopped as Vanessa's hand tightened on his arm. "Yes, I've really come to appreciate contemporary design." After the party, Sarah stayed behind to help clean up. "Something's wrong," she said, loading the dishwasher with more force than necessary. "That's not the Michael we know." "People change after marriage," I said, though the words felt hollow even as I spoke them. Sarah shook her head. "Not like this, not into shadows of themselves." I spent that night remembering all the small moments I'd dismissed. Michael declining invitations to family events with vague excuses. The time I dropped by unannounced and found him frantically cleaning because Vanessa likes things just so. The way he'd stopped telling his passionate, meandering stories about historical events that had once been such a part of who he was. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The next morning, I called and suggested lunch, just the two of us. To my surprise, he agreed, though he insisted on a restaurant far from their neighborhood. Over salads, neither. Of us 8, I finally asked the question that had been burning in my throat. "Are you happy, sweetheart?" The look that crossed his face, a mixture of fear, confusion, and something like relief, took my breath away. For a moment, I saw my little boy again, the one who would run to me with scraped knees and broken toys, trusting I could fix anything. "It's not that simple, Mom," he whispered, pushing lettuce around his plate. "Marriage is complicated." "Complicated, yes. Diminishing, no," I said, reaching for his hand. "Talk to me." And finally, he did talk. How Vanessa controlled every aspect of their home, down to the temperature settings he wasn't allowed to adjust. How she managed their finances so completely that he had to ask permission to buy books for his classroom, despite his teacher's salary going directly into their joint account. How she'd dismiss his interests as childish, his love of history, his collection of vintage maps, his passion for teaching. "Sometimes I think I'm going crazy," he confessed, his voice barely audible. "She'll tell me I agreed to things I know we never discussed. Tell me I'm too sensitive when I get upset about selling Dad's Rolex, which I never agreed to, Mom. I came home one day, and it was just gone." His hands trembled around his water glass. "But then she can be so wonderful, so supportive in front of others. Everyone thinks she's perfect." "Mom, you've seen it," he said quietly. "That's how it works. If she was terrible all the time, maybe I'd—" He stopped, looking around nervously. "I should go. She'll be wondering where I am." "Michael," I started, but he was already standing, dropping enough cash to cover both our barely touched meals. "Please don't say anything to her about this," he pleaded. "It'll only make things worse." I watched him hurry away, my heart breaking. That night, I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with revelations. The next morning, I made 2 calls, one to my attorney and one to the county records office. I needed to know exactly where things stood with that house, with the mortgage I held. I had a feeling I might need every bit of leverage I could get. 3 weeks later, Vanessa sent out an email to the entire family. "Dear all, Michael and I are excited to host Thanksgiving this year. We've completed the dining room renovations and can't wait to show everyone our vision come to life. Please let us know if you can join us and what you'd like to bring. Love, V." I knew immediately that Michael hadn't been consulted. The formal tone, the emphasis on their vision, the signature. My son had always signed family emails with his full name, a habit from his teaching days. But I responded enthusiastically, offering to bring my traditional apple cranberry pie and arrive early to help with preparations. Vanessa's response came quickly. "That would be lovely, Patricia. Come at 10 a.m. Thanksgiving morning dawned cold and clear. I gathered my contributions, the pie, a bottle of Michael's favorite sparkling cider, and a small photo album I'd put together of his father's family recipes. As I pulled into their driveway, something felt off. There was no warm glow from the windows, no smell of roasting turkey wafting from the vents. The door opened before I could knock. Vanessa stood there in an expensive cream sweater dress, her smile tight. "Patricia, there's been a change of plans." "Change of plans?" I echoed, stepping into the foyer. The house was immaculate as always, but eerily quiet. "Yes, unfortunately," she said, at least having the grace to look uncomfortable. "Michael's feeling a bit under the weather. Nothing serious, just a migraine. We've decided to keep things very quiet and small today. If he's not feeling well, I should check on him," I said, moving toward the stairs. I brought his favorite cider. Vanessa stepped smoothly into my path. "He's resting right now. Best not to disturb him." Something in her eyes made my skin prickle. With alarm. Vanessa, I'd like to see my son. As I said, he's resting. Her voice hardened. And frankly, Patricia, I think it's best if you leave now. Michael doesn't need the additional stress of company. This isn't a friendly suggestion, I said, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. The November light filtering through the leaded glass windows cast strange shadows across Vanessa's perfect features, making her look almost mask-like. Where is Michael? And why are you really trying to keep me from seeing him? I'm not trying to keep you from anything. Vanessa's tone dripped with false concern, her manicured hands smoothing invisible wrinkles from her cream sweater dress, a nervous tell I'd noticed over the years. I'm simply protecting my husband's well-being. He's quite clear that he doesn't want company today, even family. The house felt wrong. Too quiet, too sterile. The antique grandfather clock I'd given them as a wedding gift stood silent in the corner, its pendulum still. Michael would never have let it go unwound. He'd always loved its gentle ticking. The air held no trace of Thanksgiving preparation, no warm spices or roasting turkey, just the artificial pine scent of expensive candles that Vanessa preferred. That's when I heard it, a muffled sound from the direction of the garage. My son's voice, though I couldn't make out the words. The sound was followed by a metallic clang, like someone bumping into workshop tools. Without hesitation, I moved past Vanessa, my designer heels clicking purposefully on the hardwood floors she'd insisted on installing over the original Victorian parquet. She grabbed my arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into my sleeve, with surprising strength. The polished veneer cracked, showing something ugly beneath. "The garage is off limits," she snapped, her composed facade splintering. "This is my house, and you have no right." "Actually," I cut in, surprising myself with how steady my voice remained, pulling free from her grip. "It's technically my house. Or have you forgotten who holds your mortgage?" The look she gave me then was pure venom, stripped of all pretense. Her carefully lined lips pulled back in a snarl that would have shocked her real estate clients. I took advantage of her momentary shock to stride to the garage door, throwing it open before she could stop me. The blast of cold air hit me first, carrying the musty smell of cardboard boxes and concrete. Light filtered weakly through dusty windows, catching the swirls of disturbed air. What I saw made my blood run cold. Michael sat at a small folding table in the corner of the garage, surrounded by boxes and renovation debris. A paper plate with what looked like a hastily made sandwich sat before him, the bread already curling in the cold air. A small space heater hummed nearby, its red coils providing more light than warmth in the vast space. His father's prized collection of historical maps, once proudly displayed in his study, lay carelessly stuffed in a packing box beside him, corners bent and torn. He looked up, startled, his face pale beneath 2 days' worth of stubble. Vanessa had always insisted he shave. Daily, the spark in his eyes, the passionate light that had always animated his features when talking about history or his students, had dimmed to nearly nothing. "Mom," he said weakly, his breath visible in the cold air. I can explain." "Yes," I said quietly, taking in every detail of this scene. The untouched sandwich, the way he hunched as if trying to preserve warmth, the defeated slump of his shoulders. "I think you'd better." "Michael, don't," Vanessa commanded from behind me, her voice taking on that silky, manipulative tone I'd heard too often lately. "This is between us. Family matters should stay private, remember?" But something had shifted in my son's eyes. A spark of the strength I'd always known was there. The same determination I'd seen when he'd decided to become a teacher, despite everyone pushing him toward law school. He stood slowly, his chair scraping against the concrete floor. "No," he said, his voice shaking but growing stronger with each word. "No more secrets. No more hiding." He turned to me, and in that moment, I saw both the wounded man he'd become and the confident son I'd raised. The truth, when it came, poured out like a broken dam. The argument that erupted in that garage would change everything. Vanessa's careful facade crumbled completely as she realized she was losing control of both Michael and the situation. Her voice rose to a shrill pitch, accusations flying like arrows in the cold air. The space heater's red glow cast menacing, shadows on the walls, turning the garage into something like a theater for this final confrontation. "You ungrateful, pathetic excuse for a man?" She spat at Michael, her designer boots clicking sharply as she advanced on him. "Everything I've done has been to elevate us, to make something of this life you seem content to waste in that shabby classroom with your dusty old books and your stupid historical stories that nobody cares about. Do you know how embarrassing it is to have a husband who gets excited about Civil War artifacts while my colleagues' husbands are making partner at law firms?" I noticed Michael's hands trembling, but not from fear this time, from anger. A box of his beloved historical documents lay scattered at his feet, some pages crumpled as if they'd been thrown there. The sight seemed to fuel something in him. I stepped between them, my voice cutting through her tirade like steel. "That's enough. Michael, go get your coat. You're coming with me." I could see his car keys hanging on their designated hook, one of Vanessa's many rules about where everything must be placed, and grabbed them. "He's not going anywhere." Vanessa blocked the garage door, her perfect makeup starting to smear at the corners of her eyes. "This is our home, our marriage. You have no right to interfere. Michael, tell her. Tell her how happy we are when she's not meddling." Michael stood slowly, his shoulders straightening. In the dim light, he looked remarkably like his father. The same quiet strength, the same unwavering integrity once he'd made up his mind. "Our home? Our marriage? When was the last time you asked what I wanted, Vanessa? When was the last time anything in this house reflected who I am? Who you are?" She laughed, a brittle, ugly sound that echoed off the garage walls. "You're a high school teacher making $40,000 a year. Without me, without my vision, you'd still be living in that cramped apartment with your secondhand furniture and your juvenile collections. I made you presentable. I gave you class." "I was happy there," Michael said quietly, and I heard the revelation in his voice, saw the moment of clarity cross his face. "I was myself there. My students loved visiting that apartment. They said it was like a museum. Remember how they used to come study on weekends? Before you decided it was inappropriate to have them over?" I watched my son climb the stairs to get his coat, Vanessa following him, still arguing, still trying to maintain control. The garage light flickered, casting strange shadows on the walls covered in expensive storage systems that had replaced Michael's beloved workshop space. Took the moment alone to pull out my phone and make a call I'd prepared for, but hoped I'd never need to make. My fingers shook slightly as I dialed, but my voice was firm. "Harold? It's Patricia. Initialize Plan B. Yes, immediately. Send everything we've documented to Victoria. Every email, every bank statement, every recorded conversation. Yes, including the garage incident. It ends today." By the time Michael returned, coat in hand and a small bag hastily packed, Vanessa had shifted tactics. Her voice was honey-sweet, tears glistening in her expertly made-up eyes, one manicured hand reaching for him beseechingly. "Baby, please. You know I just want what's best for us. We can work this out. We don't need to involve your mother in our private matters. Remember how good we can be together." But something had broken in that garage. Some spell, some fear, some chain that had held my son captive in his own life. He looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time seeing not the polished facade but the manipulation beneath. The space heater clicked off, leaving us in cold silence. "There's nothing private about emotional abuse," he said, his voice stronger than I'd heard it in months. "Nothing private about financial control or psychological manipulation. And I'm done pretending otherwise." The next morning started with a barrage of texts and calls from Vanessa, first to Michael, then to me when he didn't respond. Her messages cycled between tearful apologies and venomous threats, each more desperate than the last. The timestamp between them grew shorter, her composure deteriorating with each notification. "You've ruined everything," she wrote. "I'll tell everyone what you did, how you manipulated Michael against me, how you stole our home out of pure spite. Everyone will know what kind of mother tries to destroy her son's marriage. Do you think your precious design clients will want to work with someone so toxic?" My phone buzzed again. "Michael, baby, please. You know I only want what's best for us. Come home and we can talk about this rationally. I'll even let you hang one of those awful maps in the living room." I forwarded each message to my attorney without responding, documenting the escalating harassment. The morning light streamed through my kitchen windows, catching the steam rising from our coffee cups. Michael sat at my kitchen table, clutching, his mug like a lifeline, looking both shattered and somehow lighter than I'd seen him in years. The bruise-like circles under his eyes spoke of a sleepless night, but there was a new alertness in his expression. Sarah arrived around 9, her lawyer's briefcase in one hand and a bag of fresh pastries in the other. She took one look at her brother, dropped everything on the counter, and pulled him into a fierce hug. The siblings stood there for a long moment, Sarah's dark hair mixing with Michael's as she held him. "I knew something was wrong," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I should have pushed harder, done something sooner. All those times you canceled our lunch dates." "We all should have," I said, setting down a plate of Michael's favorite blueberry pancakes, a breakfast I'd made for him after every childhood crisis, from his first heartbreak to his father's funeral. "But we're doing something now." That's when the doorbell rang, its chime shattering our moment of peace. Through the front window's shears, I saw a sleek black Mercedes in my driveway, its engine idling. On my front step stood Thomas Pierce, Vanessa's brother, his expensive suit failing to hide his aggressive stance. Behind him, Vanessa waited in her car, engine running, her perfectly coiffed hair visible through the windshield. "Mrs. Montgomery," he said, his smile as fake as his sister's had always been, adjusting his Rolex, the same model as Michael's inherited watch that had mysteriously disappeared. "We need to discuss this situation like reasonable people. Vanessa's told me there was an unfortunate misunderstanding yesterday." "There was no misunderstanding," I cut him off, positioning myself firmly in the doorway. "And unless you're here as an attorney, we have nothing to discuss." "Actually," he stepped closer, lowering his voice to a menacing whisper, his cologne overwhelming in the morning air. "We have a lot to discuss. Like how quickly a teacher's reputation can be ruined with a few well-placed rumors. How easily concerned parents might believe stories about inappropriate behavior. Small towns can be so judgmental. Are you threatening my son?" My voice could have frozen fire. Behind me, I heard Sarah's quick footsteps. "I'm suggesting that everyone's best interest would be served by resolving this privately." Vanessa returns home, the house situation remains unchanged, and Michael's career continues undisturbed. Simple as that. Sarah appeared beside me, her phone held up, its red recording light blinking steadily. "I've recorded every word of that threat, Mr. Pierce. Would you like me to play it back for you? I'm sure the school board would be very interested in hearing it." His face darkened, hand tightening on his leather briefcase. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. My sister and I have connections in this town. And I have 35 years of relationships, respect, and evidence of your sister's abuse," I replied, feeling Michael's presence behind us, drawing strength from his silent support. "Would you like to compare resources? Because I don't think your connections will hold up well against documented evidence of harassment and extortion." Thomas stepped back, adjusting his tie with a practiced gesture that couldn't quite hide his unease. "This isn't over. Not by a long shot." "Actually, it is." Michael's voice came from behind us, steady and clear despite the slight tremor in his hands. "Tell Vanessa I'll have my attorney contact hers about divorce proceedings. Any further communication should go through them. By Monday morning, Vanessa had launched her campaign of retaliation with the precise calculation of someone used to orchestrating public opinion. The principal of Michael's school, Dr. Eleanor Martinez, called him in early for a meeting. Anonymous. Emails had been received questioning his professional conduct. The autumn sun had barely cleared the horizon when we walked together through the quiet halls of Bristol County High, our footsteps echoing against rows of lockers. I squeezed Michael's hand before he entered the principal's office, noting how his classroom door across the hall stood open, student artwork and historical timelines visible inside, a sharp contrast to the sterile perfection Vanessa had demanded at home. "The timing of these allegations is suspicious," Dr. Martinez said, sliding the printed emails across her oak desk. Her reading glasses caught the morning light as she studied Michael's face. "Especially given that they're all received within hours of each other, none from actual parents of current students. And oddly, they all use similar language, almost as if they were written by the same person." Michael's hands trembled slightly as he read them, coffee cup rattling against its saucer, but his voice was steady. "These are false accusations. I'm in the process of divorcing my wife, who has a documented history of manipulative behavior. I believe this is her attempt at retaliation." The principal nodded slowly, removing her glasses. "I suspected as much. The Michael Montgomery I've known for 15 years bears no resemblance to the person described in these emails. Take a few days off. Let your attorney handle this. Your job is safe." "Thank you," Michael whispered, relief evident in the slump of his shoulders. "The students will be fine," Dr. Martinez assured him. "And they'll be thrilled to have you back. That Civil War reenactment you've been planning for the junior class? It's still on." But Vanessa was just getting started. By afternoon, she'd moved on to social media, posting cryptic messages about betrayal and toxic family interference. Her carefully curated network of real estate contacts began unfriending Michael, leaving subtle comments about standing with Vanessa. Each notification made him flinch, years of conditioning still raw and fresh. "Let them," Sarah said fiercely as we sat around my kitchen table that evening, takeout containers scattered between legal documents. The smell of Thai food, something Vanessa had always deemed too ethnic for her tastes, filled the warm air. "We're building a different kind of case, one based on facts, not manipulated public opinion." My attorney, Victoria Chen, spread out another set of papers, her silver bracelet catching the light as she pointed to specific passages. "The financial evidence is damning. Not just the watch, but multiple instances of coerced financial decisions, hidden accounts, attempts to force additional debt. Plus, the documented incident of making Michael eat in the garage. That's textbook emotional abuse. No judge will look favorably on that. She'll claim I agreed to everything," Michael said quietly, pushing his pad thai around his plate. "That. I'm being manipulated by my family now. She's always been good at twisting things." "No," Victoria replied firmly, her dark eyes sharp with certainty. "The paper trail tells a different story. And—" She hesitated, looking at me, seeking permission with a slight nod. I took a deep breath, reaching for Michael's hand across the scattered papers. "And we found something else. The property development her brother wanted you to invest in? It's a fraud scheme. They've done this before in other cities. Convince people to invest in fake development projects, then disappear. With the money. That's why they move so often. Why Vanessa never talks about her past." Michael's face went pale beneath the warm kitchen lights. "How did you—" "I hired a private investigator the day I found you in that garage. Vanessa and Thomas have a history of these scams. They've just been clever enough to avoid prosecution so far. But their luck is running out." Sarah leaned forward, eyes blazing with the same fire I'd seen in her courtroom appearances. So that's why she was so angry when Michael wouldn't sign those refinancing papers. She wasn't just trying to control him, she was trying to scam him, use his good name and reputation to lure more victims. Exactly, Victoria confirmed, pulling out another folder. And we've shared this information with the appropriate authorities. They're very interested in talking to both Vanessa and Thomas Pierce. Very interested indeed. 2 days later, the other shoe dropped with the precise timing of a carefully orchestrated attack. I was at my design studio, reviewing fabric swatches for a client's renovation when Harold, my office manager of 20 years, rushed in. His usually composed demeanor was shattered, reading glasses askew. "Patricia, you need to see this. She's done it. She's actually done it." He handed me his tablet, open to a local news website. The screen showed Bristol County's most watched morning show, and there was Vanessa, perfectly styled in a conservative navy suit that I recognized. I'd helped Michael pick it out as a birthday gift for her last year. She stood on the courthouse steps, giving an interview that made my blood boil. Local teacher's family uses financial coercion to destroy marriage. My mother-in-law, Vanessa's voice quavered perfectly in the video, practiced tears making her mascara run just enough to look genuine without being messy, used her position as our mortgage holder to force my husband into leaving our home. She's always resented our marriage, always tried to control Michael through financial manipulation. Now she's stolen our dream home, all because I dared to suggest Michael pursue a better career than teaching. She couldn't stand seeing him happy, independent, building a life away from her influence. I was already dialing Victoria when my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Turn on Channel 7 now. Thomas is heading to the school. I'm calling the police." "We're handling this," Victoria assured me before I could speak, her voice clipped and focused. "But you need to get to Michael's school immediately. Thomas Pierce is there and he's making quite a scene. He's brought reporters." I broke every speed limit getting to Bristol County High School, my hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. Police cars were already in the parking lot, their lights flashing against the red brick building, and I could see a small crowd gathered near the main entrance. News vans lined the street. My heart stopped when I spotted Michael, standing straight-backed, despite Thomas Pierce towering over him, jabbing a finger in his face. The morning sun cast their shadows long across the pavement. "You ungrateful little parasite," Thomas was shouting as I approached, his expensive suit rumpled, tie askew, a far cry from his usual polished appearance. "My sister gave you everything. And this is how you repay her? By running to Mommy with lies? You were nothing before Vanessa, nothing but a small-town teacher with delusions of importance." "Step away from my son," I commanded, my voice carrying across the parking lot. Several teachers had their phones out, recording everything. Students pressed against classroom windows, watching the drama unfold. Thomas whirled to face me, his face mottled with rage. "You're done, Patricia Montgomery. By the time we're finished with you, no one in Bristol County will hire your design firm. We'll make sure everyone knows how you abuse your power, how you manipulate and control your adult son. Your reputation will be in shreds." "Is that before or after the FBI investigates your property development scams?" I asked calmly, noting with satisfaction how he flinched at the word FBI. The crowd murmured, phones still recording. "Because they're very interested in your pattern of defrauding investors. In fact," I checked my watch, making a show of it. "They should be executing a search warrant at your office right about now." The color drained from Thomas's face, his bravado crumbling. "You're bluffing. You can't prove anything." "Like you bluffed those investors in Sacramento? Or Phoenix?" Michael's voice was steady now, stronger with each word. The morning sun caught his face, and I saw his father's strength there. "We have everything, Thomas. Every fake proposal, every shell company, every victim's statement. It's over." As if on cue, 2 police officers approached, their badges catching the light. "Mr. Pierce, we need you to come with us. Your sister is already at the station, and there are some federal agents who'd like to speak with you." The mask of intimidation crumbled completely, replaced by naked panic. Thomas looked wildly between the officers, Michael and me, his carefully constructed world unraveling before his eyes. In the distance, more police cars approached, their sirens growing louder. "This isn't what it looks like," he stammered, taking a step back. "We can explain everything. Michael, you know Vanessa loves you. We can fix this, work something out." His voice cracked on the last word, desperation replacing threats. "The only thing that needs fixing," Michael replied, while students and teachers applauded from the sidelines, "is the damage you and your sister have done to people's lives. And that's exactly what's happening now." As the police led Thomas away in handcuffs, the crowd of teachers and students dispersed, but the ripple effects of that morning's confrontation were just beginning. Inside the school's main office, Michael sat with his department head and 3 school board members who had arrived to witness the scene. The local news crews outside were already running with a very different story than the one Vanessa had tried to sell them. "We've received dozens of letters from current and former students," the department head announced, spreading papers across the conference table, "all expressing support for Mr. Montgomery, sharing stories of how he's impacted their lives. Did you know your Civil War reenactment program has become a model for other schools in the state?" Michael blinked back tears, reaching for one of the letters. Vanessa always said it was embarrassing, that no one took it seriously." On the contrary, one of the board members interjected, "We've had multiple districts request your curriculum. Your passion for teaching has never been in question, Mr. Montgomery, and neither has your character." My phone buzzed, Victoria calling with updates. The FBI raid on Thomas's office had uncovered evidence of widespread fraud, affecting not just their current scheme, but dozens of victims across multiple states. Vanessa's carefully constructed image as a successful real estate agent was unraveling as investigators discovered her role in luring potential investors. "They found your father's watch," Victoria reported, her voice triumphant, "along with several other items Vanessa had sold without authorization. The evidence of financial abuse is overwhelming. The DA is considering criminal charges." Back at my house that evening, Sarah orchestrated a coordinated response to Vanessa's media campaign. "We're releasing statements from the school board, the FBI, and selected character witnesses," she explained, her laptop screen reflecting in her determined eyes. "By morning, everyone will know exactly who the Pierce siblings really are." Michael sat quietly on my sofa, turning his father's recovered watch in his hands. The gold caught the lamplight, bringing back memories of happier times. "I kept thinking it was my fault," he said softly. "That if I'd been more successful, more ambitious, more like the husband she wanted." "That's how abusers work," I replied, sitting beside him. "They make you believe you're not enough, that you need to change. But you were always enough, Michael. More than enough." The next morning's headlines told the story. Local teacher unveils major investment fraud ring. Vanessa's carefully crafted interview was replaced by coverage of Thomas's arrest and the FBI investigation. Former victims came forward, sharing stories that matched Michael's experience, the charm, the manipulation, the gradual isolation and control. My phone rang continuously with calls from former clients and business associates, all expressing support and sharing their own suspicions about Vanessa's behavior at charity events and social gatherings. The tide of public opinion shifted dramatically as the full scope of the Pierce siblings' deception came to light. "She never loved me, did she?" Michael asked that evening, as we sorted through boxes of his belongings retrieved from the house. His historical maps lay carefully spread on the dining room table, ready to be properly framed and displayed. It was all part of their scheme. "I think Vanessa doesn't know how to love," Sarah answered, hanging one of Michael's favorite Civil War photographs. "She only knows how to control and manipulate. But that's her tragedy, not yours." The final blow to Vanessa's reputation came from an unexpected source. Her former assistant, emboldened by recent events, provided investigators with detailed records of manipulated property deals and forged documents. The evidence painted a picture of systematic fraud stretching back years. Local news crews gathered outside the courthouse as Vanessa and Thomas were formally charged. Gone was the polished real estate agent in designer suits. The woman being led into the building looked smaller somehow, her mask of perfection cracked beyond repair. Michael chose not to attend the arraignment. Instead, he was back in his classroom, doing what he loved most, teaching history to students who hung on his every word. The Civil War reenactment planning continued, now with full support from the school board and enthusiastic parent volunteers. "You know what the strangest part is?" he said that night, as we shared dinner in my kitchen. "I feel free, not just from Vanessa, but from all the doubts and fears she planted. I can breathe again." Sarah raised her glass. "To freedom, and to family, the real kind. To truth," I added, watching my son smile, really smile, for the first time in years. "And to new beginnings." As we clinked glasses, I thought about the house, that beautiful Victorian that had become both battleground and symbol. Soon we would begin renovations, stripping away Vanessa's cold modernism to restore its original warmth and character, just as Michael was being restored, piece by piece, to his true self. The Pierce siblings' downfall made national news, but in Bristol County, a quieter story was unfolding. The story of a teacher rediscovering his passion, a son reclaiming his identity, and a family growing stronger through adversity. Sometimes the greatest victories aren't won in courtrooms or headlines, but in small moments of healing and truth. As I watched Michael laugh at one of Sarah's jokes, his father's watch gleaming on his wrist where it belonged, I knew we had won something far more precious than any legal battle. We had won back our family. The weeks following Vanessa and Thomas's arrest brought changes both subtle and profound. Michael began the delicate process of reclaiming not just his home, but his identity. Each day brought small victories, decisions made without second-guessing, opinions expressed without fear, joy rediscovered in the simple pleasures Vanessa had deemed beneath them. The Victorian house stood empty for a month while legal proceedings continued. Then, on a crisp Saturday morning, we gathered there, Michael, Sarah, myself, and a team of contractors I'd worked with for years. The renovation would be extensive, but this time every choice would reflect Michael's vision. "I want to restore the original library," he announced, standing in what Vanessa had converted into a sterile home office, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, like the ones Dad built in our old house. "And the map room, I want to bring that back too." As workers began stripping away the cold gray paint Vanessa had insisted on, warm mahogany wainscoting emerged underneath. Each revealed detail felt like a metaphor for Michael's own emergence from the layers of control that had suppressed him. "Look at this," he called excitedly, carefully peeling back wallpaper in the dining room. "The original Victorian pattern is still here." His eyes lit up with the same enthusiasm I remembered from his childhood discoveries. "Did you know this style was popular in the 1880s? The colors represented different social messages." Sarah and I exchanged glances, both fighting tears. This was our Michael, the passionate historian, the natural teacher, the man who found joy in stories of the past, the person Vanessa had tried so hard to change. The transformation wasn't limited to the house. At school, Michael's confidence bloomed. His Civil War reenactment program expanded, drawing attention from educational conferences. Students who had graduated years ago wrote letters about how his teaching had inspired their own careers in history or education. "Mr. Montgomery," one letter read, "you showed me that it's okay to be passionate about things others might not understand. Your enthusiasm for history made me feel less alone in my own interests." One evening, as we sorted through boxes in what would become the library, Michael found his old journal. "I stopped writing in it when Vanessa said it was a waste of time," he said softly, running his fingers over the worn leather cover. She said no one cared about my random historical facts. Read something, Sarah encouraged, pausing in her organization of his rescued book collection. Michael opened to a random page and his face lit up. Listen to this. Today's fascinating find. In 1876, Alexander Graham Bell's first phone call was actually a cry for help because he'd spilled acid on himself. History is full of these beautiful accidents that change everything. He laughed, a full, genuine sound that echoed through the half-finished room. I'd forgotten how much I loved discovering these stories. The prosecution of Vanessa and Thomas proceeded steadily, with more victims coming forward each week. Michael chose to provide a written statement rather than testify in person, a decision everyone supported. His words, detailed and clear, helped secure significant sentences for both siblings. 15 years, Sarah reported after the sentencing. No possibility of parole for at least 10, and full restitution ordered to all victims. Michael nodded, his expression complex. I don't feel happy about it exactly. Just relieved. Like a weight I didn't even know I was carrying is finally gone. The healing wasn't always linear. There were still moments when Michael would hesitate before making a decision, automatically looking for approval that he no longer needed. Sometimes a particular phrase or gesture would trigger memories of Vanessa's manipulation. But now he had tools to handle these moments, thanks to the therapist he'd started seeing. It's okay to have setbacks, his therapist had said. Healing isn't about forgetting the trauma. It's about learning to move forward despite it. The house renovation progressed steadily, each choice a small act of reclamation. The crystal chandelier I'd once tried to give them now hung proudly in the dining room. Michael's historical maps and documents found homes on freshly painted walls. The kitchen, once a showpiece of modern minimalism, transformed into a warm, welcoming space where he could actually cook the meals he enjoyed. Most importantly, the house began to feel like a home again. Friends and family dropped by regularly, filling the rooms with laughter and conversation. Michael's students came for study sessions, sprawling across the library with their textbooks and laptops, engaging in passionate discussions about historical events. You know what I realized? Michael said one evening as we sat in his newly finished library, sharing tea and watching the sunset through restored Victorian windows. Vanessa always said I needed to change to be happy, but I was happiest being exactly who I am. I reached over and squeezed his hand, noting how the tension that had become his constant companion during his marriage had finally eased from his shoulders. That's because who you are is pretty wonderful, sweetheart. He smiled, picking up his father's watch from its new place of honor on his desk. I think Dad would be proud of how this all turned out. He would, I agreed, watching my son, my true son, finally at peace in his own space, in his own skin. He absolutely would. A year passed, marked by seasons of change and growth. The Victorian house bloomed under Michael's care, each room reflecting not just his vision but his renewed spirit. The library became a neighborhood legend, with its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and comfortable reading nooks. Local history buffs gathered there monthly for discussions that often lasted late into the evening. As another Thanksgiving approached, Michael surprised me with an unexpected question during our weekly Sunday dinner. Mom, would you mind if I hosted this year? He glanced around my familiar dining room, where we'd shared so many meals during his recovery. I know it's always been at your house, but I thought, maybe it's time for a new tradition. The confidence in his voice, the casual way he made, the suggestion without seeking approval or apologizing, made my heart swell. I think that's a wonderful idea, sweetheart. Great! His enthusiasm bubbled over, reminding me of the boy who used to get excited about historical artifacts. I've already invited Sarah and her family, and some of my colleagues from school. And I was thinking we could volunteer at the, shelter in the morning. They always need extra hands on holidays. The day before Thanksgiving, I helped Michael with final preparations. The house smelled of cinnamon and sage, warming herbs from recipes found in his father's old cookbook. The dining room table, restored to its original Victorian splendor, was set with a mix of family heirlooms and pieces Michael had carefully chosen himself. "Remember last year?" he asked quietly, adjusting a flower arrangement. "That awful scene. In the garage?" "I try not to," I admitted, watching him handle the delicate crystal glasses that Vanessa had always forbidden him to use, claiming they were too fussy. "I do," he said, surprising me. Not to dwell on it, but to remind myself how far I've come, how much stronger I am now. He straightened a place card written in his distinctive teacher's handwriting. "Last year, I was afraid to speak up about what I wanted for dinner. Now I'm hosting 20 people and nobody's telling me I'm doing it wrong." The morning of Thanksgiving dawned clear and cold. Michael had already left for the shelter when I arrived, carrying my traditional apple cranberry pie. Through the front windows, I could see warm light spilling onto the porch, welcoming and bright. The door stood open, and the sound of laughter drifted out, Michael's students helping with last-minute preparations. Inside, the transformation took my breath away. Not just the physical renovation, though that was stunning, but the spirit of the place. Michael moved confidently through his kitchen, directing his volunteers with the same engaging energy he brought to his classroom. History books and artifacts shared space comfortably with modern conveniences. Everything spoke of a life fully and authentically lived. "Mom," he greeted me with a hug, flour dusting his apron. "Wait till you see what we discovered about traditional harvest celebrations while researching the menu. Did you know that in Victorian times?" I listened to him enthusiastically share historical facts, watched him coordinate multiple dishes with easy authority, observed how naturally he welcomed each guest. This was my son, not Vanessa's carefully controlled husband, but the real Michael, flourishing in his freedom. Sarah arrived with her family, her children immediately racing to the library where their uncle kept a special collection of historical children's books. "This place," she whispered to me, "it's finally him. Really him." The afternoon unfolded in waves of conversation and laughter. Michael's students mingled with family friends, sharing stories about their favorite history lessons. Several of his colleagues commented on his renewed passion for teaching, how his Civil War reenactment program had become a model for experiential learning. During dinner, Michael stood to make a toast. The sunlight streaming through the restored Victorian windows caught the face of his father's watch, now proudly worn and treasured. "Last year," he began, his voice steady, "I was sitting in a cold garage, believing I deserved to be isolated and controlled. Today, I'm surrounded by people I love, in a home that truly reflects who I am." He looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes. "Someone once told me I needed to change to be worthy of love. But all of you, my family, my friends, my students, you loved me exactly as I am. Thank you for helping me remember that." Later, as guests moved to the library for coffee and dessert, I found Michael in the kitchen, looking at old family photos he'd hung on the wall. Among them was a new addition, a picture from his first day back teaching after everything happened, his students surrounding him with signs of support. "You know what's strange?" he said, not turning around. "I actually feel grateful for what happened last Thanksgiving." "Grateful?" I asked, surprised. He nodded. "It was awful, yes, but it forced me to face the truth about my marriage, about who I'd let myself become. If Vanessa hadn't pushed things so far that day, I might still be slowly disappearing piece by piece." I looked at my son, confident, authentic, whole, and understood what he meant. Sometimes the darkest moments light the way to our truest selves. "Besides," he added with a smile, "it led to this." He gestured around his warm, welcoming kitchen, at the sounds of joy and laughter drifting in from the library. "A real home, a real life, real happiness." I hugged him tightly, my heart full. "Happy Thanksgiving, sweetheart." "Happy Thanksgiving." "Mom," he replied, "thank you for fighting for me until I could fight for myself." Through the doorway, I could see his students engaging in an animated discussion about historical Thanksgiving facts. Sarah's children listening with rapt attention. The library's warm lights casting a gentle glow over the scene. This was victory. Not the legal battles won or the pieces of property reclaimed, but this moment, this joy, this man who had walked through fire and emerged not just surviving, but triumphant. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.